Emirates, Qatar Airways, Etihad, 3 airlines that turned the desert into the center of global aviation. Between them, nearly 600 wide-body jets, 300-plus destinations, and a business model that funnels millions of passengers through the Middle East every single year. For 2 decades, it worked perfectly, especially with one country, India. So much so, there are 540 weekly flights just between Dubai and India alone. It looks permanent, unassailable, structural. Then, in February 2023, Air India placed one of the largest aircraft orders in commercial aviation history, 470 jets, a deal worth $70 billion, including 6 A350-900, 34 A350-1000s, 20 Dreamliners, and 10 777Xs. Another 10 A350s in 2024, plus hundreds of narrowbodies, an army of planes aimed directly at the routes that flow through Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi. This wasn't a fleet refresh, it was a declaration of war. The Indian government not opening up its market to UAE carriers. Bilateral seat caps frozen since 2014, the UAE begging for 50,000 more weekly seats. India saying no, over and over, while Air India builds. So now, the Gulf carriers face something they've never faced before, a funded, backed, government-protected competitor sitting on the most strategically located hub in Asia. Delhi to London, 9 hours direct. Through Dubai, at least 12 hours with connections. Delhi to New York, 15 hours. Via the Gulf, at least 18 with connections. The geography doesn't lie. But here's the thing, Air India is still losing over $1 billion a year. Deliveries are delayed, passengers boarding an A350 and passengers boarding an old 777 are experiencing 2 completely different airlines. So, the real question isn't whether the Gulf carriers should be nervous, they already are. The real question is, can Air India actually pull this off before the money runs out, the delays compound, and the window closes? To understand why 470 aircraft make Emirates nervous, you first need to understand what the Gulf carriers actually are. They are not, in the traditional sense, airlines that exist to move their own citizens around. The UAE has a population of roughly 10 million. These are not countries that generate the passenger volumes to justify fleets of hundreds of wide-body aircraft. Instead, the ME3 built their empires on carrying passengers traveling between 2 foreign countries who connect through a Gulf hub. A traveler flying from Mumbai to London, for example, might route through Dubai on Emirates. The airline collects a fare for the full journey, while the passenger never sets foot in the UAE as a destination. They're just passing through. This model works because geography cooperates. The Middle East sits roughly equidistant between Europe and South Asia, making it a natural waypoint, and the model is enormously dependent on one market above all others, India. It is the market. Without Indian traffic flowing through their hubs, the economies of dozens of long-haul routes to secondary European and North American cities collapse. For years, this arrangement was mutually beneficial, or at least appeared to be. Air India, under state ownership, was a decaying institution, hemorrhaging money, flying ancient aircraft with broken seats and non-functional entertainment systems. Indian travelers had little reason to fly their national carrier when Emirates offered a superior product at a competitive price, even with the inconvenience of a connection. But that calculus has now changed. The Tata Group's acquisition of Air India in January 2022 was not merely a change of ownership, it was the beginning of a systematic dismantling of everything that made the airline a punchline. Tata, one of India's most respected industrial conglomerates, immediately launched Vihan.ai, a 5-year transformation plan structured around 3 phases: taxiing, takeoff, and climb. The fleet order was the centerpiece of the takeoff phase. Those 470 aircraft break down into 190 737 MAXs, 140 A320neos, 70 A321neos, 20 787 Dreamliners, 10 777Xs, 34 A350-1000s, and 6 A350-900s. The narrowbodies would rebuild domestic and medium-haul dominance, the widebodies would do something far more consequential. They would allow Air India to offer non-stop flights on routes that currently require a Gulf connection. The advantage isn't abstract. On the routes that matter most, Europe, North America, a direct flight from Delhi shaves hours off any Gulf connection. Not minutes, hours. And for the premium passengers that airlines actually make money on, that gap is everything. In November 2024, Air India completed its merger with Vistara, the full-service joint venture between Tata and Singapore Airlines. This created a unified carrier operating over 4,200 weekly flights. Simultaneously, Air India Express absorbed AIX Connect, formerly Air Asia India, consolidating Tata's low-cost operations. The result is a two-brand structure: Air India for full-service domestic and international, Air India Express for budget operations. Clean, logical, and designed to compete on every front. Then, in late 2024, Air India placed an additional order for 100 Airbus aircraft, 10 more A380s, and 90 A320 family jets, bringing the total commitment even higher. The message was unmistakable. This is not a tentative expansion. This is an airline spending at a pace that assumes it will become a global carrier within the decade. But the fleet order alone does not explain why the Gulf carriers are nervous. Airlines order planes all the time. What makes this situation uniquely threatening is the regulatory wall the Indian government has erected around its aviation market. The bilateral air services agreement between India and the UAE allows for approximately 66,000 weekly seats in each direction. That cap has not been revised since 2014. Emirates utilizes nearly 100% of its entitlement. The demand is there, the supply is artificially constrained. The UAE has repeatedly requested an increase of 50,000 additional weekly seats. India has repeatedly said no. This is not accidental. The Indian government is deliberately restricting foreign carrier access to protect Air India's expansion window. For Air India to justify spending $70 billion or more on new planes, it needs a market environment where those planes have routes to fly without being immediately undercut by Gulf carriers. It is protectionist, but protectionism, in this case, is the strategy. The financial picture behind Air India's transformation reveals both the ambition and the fragility of the endeavor. In FY25, Air India's consolidated revenue jumped to approximately $9.4 billion, approaching market leader Indigo's figures. Yet, Air India also posted a consolidated net loss of $1.3 billion USD in FY25, a 48% increase year over year. The airline is burning cash at a staggering rate, absorbing the costs of fleet renewal, cabin retrofits estimated at $400 million, and the operational complexity of merging 4 separate airlines into 2. This is the uncomfortable reality beneath the headline figures. Air India is spending money it does not yet earn on a future it is not yet built. Meanwhile, the competitive threat to the Gulf carriers is already materializing in the data, and Air India is not the only Indian carrier eyeing the Gulf carriers' lunch. Indigo, India's dominant low-cost airline, eclipsed Air India's record just months later by ordering 500 A320neo family aircraft at the Paris Air Show in June 2023. More significantly, Indigo has ordered 30 A350-900 widebodies, with options for 70 more, and dry-leased Boeing 787-9s from Norse Atlantic, signaling its own entry into long-haul flying. The combined Indian airline order book now stands at nearly 1,000 aircraft for delivery in the coming years. The Gulf carriers are not facing one challenge, they are facing 2. The Tata Group now fights a war on 2 fronts, defending against Gulf carriers internationally while competing with Indigo domestically and increasingly abroad. For all the ambition embedded in the fleet order, Air India's execution has been far from seamless. The airline's $400 million wide-body retrofit program has slipped as well. This means that for years to come, passengers booking Air India on certain routes will board aircraft with broken in-flight entertainment, worn seats, and non-functional power outlets, the very experience that drove Indian travelers to Emirates in the first place. There is also the matter of pilots. A severe shortage of experienced captains has triggered a bidding war between Air India and Indigo, with airlines reportedly offering joining bonuses of roughly $60,000 to poach experienced crew. New flight duty time limitation rules intended to reduce fatigue have paradoxically increased the total number of pilots needed, further straining an already thin labor pool and leading to flight cancellations. And then there is the question that no amount of Tata Group money can easily answer. Air India's brand, tarnished over decades of government mismanagement, cannot be rebuilt with new aircraft alone. It requires a service culture, a reliability record, and a consistency of experience that currently exists on the airline's new A350s, but is jarringly absent on its unrenovated 777s. Passengers have described two entirely different airlines, depending on which aircraft they board. Those flying the newly inducted A350s, originally built for Aeroflot before sanctions redirected them, report modern business class seats and functional entertainment. Those on legacy 777s report an experience closer to the Air India of old: neglected cabins, indifferent crew, and equipment that doesn't work. The Gulf carrier's nervousness is not irrational. It is the rational response of incumbents watching the regulatory and competitive landscape shift beneath them simultaneously. They built their empires on the assumption that India would remain a fragmented, undeserved market whose travelers had no choice but to connect through the Middle East. For 2 decades, that assumption held. Now, the Tata Group is spending on the bet that it won't hold for a third. The Indian government is using bilateral restrictions as a weapon to buy Air India time. Of course, the Gulf carriers still maintain formidable strengths. Emirates' product is among the finest in commercial aviation. Qatar Airways' network depth is extraordinary. Their hubs are purpose-built for efficiency in a way that Delhi's congested Indira Gandhi International Airport is not. They have pricing flexibility that Air India cannot match, while posting annual losses. But the calculus has shifted. For the first time in decades, Indian carriers have the capital, the fleet orders, and the government backing to compete for the traffic that Gulf carriers assumed was permanently theirs. Whether Air India can actually execute on this promise, whether Tata can transform a bureaucratic relic into a world-class airline before the money runs out and the delivery delays compound, remains genuinely uncertain. What is not uncertain is that Emirates, Qatar, and Etihad understand the threat. Their public statements, their lobbying for bilateral relief, their strategic pivots away from India all confirm that the nervousness is real. They built their business on Indian traffic flowing through their hubs. And now, for the first time, someone with the money and the motive to redirect that flow has shown up at the gate. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?